Craig Mertens, I'm the General Manager at GraphicsFlow. Thank you for joining us here at our Decorator Academy, sponsored by GraphicsFlow. Today's class, we are going to be talking about the business of Applique, growing your business with Applique. And I think probably the first thing we need to do is really define what Applique is and talk about why you should be doing it. And I've prepared a couple visuals. If you guys don't use Pinterest, you should. It's a great place to get ideas. I went and did a quick little Google search of Pinterest for applique. And of course, the first things that are going to come up in applique are going to be all the home embroidery type designs because people on the home embroidery side of things are really super creative. And one of the unique things that they have is a lot of time on their hands. So they a lot of times don't mind doing these really complex multi-layer appliques, and they're doing these for, decorative items, things like pillows and baby blankets and fleece and quilting patches is another popular one. And you just see some absolutely stunning examples of applique. And basically what applique is you have fabric that has been cut out, and then you're using stitching, whether you're doing it by hand with a sewing needle or an embroidery machine, to stitch the fabric onto the substrate. That's really what applique is all about. And it's a form of layering. And if you look at some of these examples in here, like these quilting patches, I mean, holy smokes, look at the level of expertise and layering that went into that design. It's pretty remarkable. This is probably a little more typical of an applique, and pretty awesome, on a baby blanket or a pillow or something of that nature. So one of the I guess you would say the other kind of flavor of applique you're going to see is more along the lines of athletic type work. And I know a little bit about that because that was a really big part of our business when we owned our company called Desert Sportswear. And one of the things that we specialized in was what's called tackle twill, which is a polyester twill material. This is tackle twill right here. And we would cut these letters out on a die cut machine, which means we had to pay for a die for every letter, which is about $300. And then we would cut them into twill fabric, and then we would had adhesive backing on them, and we'd heat seal that to the substrate, whether it was a sweatshirt or we even used to do tank tops. Doing the rear ends of Sophie shorts was a really big thing that we did. I don't know if we invented it, but we were one of the first people to do it. We would sew those on with a zigzag sewing machine. So this was not getting tacked on with an embroidery machine. In fact, to this day, that is the fastest way to do zigzag applique is with a zigzag machine. If you look at all the professional sports franchises and all their athletic uniforms that have this type of lettering on them, that's almost exclusively done with a zigzag machine. And in fact, one of our customers here locally in town does all the work for the Suns and the Cardinals and the Coyotes. So that's a very fast and efficient way of doing it. If you don't believe me, you ever see somebody do it with a zigzag machine, it's lightning quick. Absolutely amazing. But you can do that same look with an embroidery machine. And when you're tacking down stitches with an embroidery machine, it has a tendency to look a little bit too professional, a little bit too uniform. When you're using a zigzag machine, it's kind of an organic, kind of an old school look. And that's funny, I have a client, she goes, I always want my zigzag stitches to be perfect. And I'm like, the point of zigzag stitches is they're not perfect. It looks like a person sewed them on. So having a little bit of imperfection in your zigzag stitches is a good thing. So this is the kind of the other side of applique. And why do you want to be doing applique? Well, number one, it is high profit. The margins in applique are very good. And also, in terms of stitch efficiency on your machine, if you're using like zigzag stitches, you might do a 3-color, 6-inch tall lettering, 2 colors. You might be using less than 5,000 stitches, the same amount of stitches you might be using on a baseball cap. But in terms of the profitability of that, let's kind of get that out in the open. Let's say you were doing a typical like 80-20 sweatshirt, something. We'll come over here and we'll just say this classic example, and that was going on a sweatshirt. And you have 2 layers of twill. Let's say there wasn't even any embroidery in there. And you had 2 layers of twill with a zigzag stitch. You're gonna have your twill on, if you're doing 6-inch letters, you're gonna have $2 to $3 in twill with both colors. Embroidery thread is practically free. You're going to have no more than 3,500 stitches on there if you're doing a zigzag stitch, so you don't have hardly any stitches. And if you have a single head machine, you're going to be able to sew 4 to 6 of those an hour. So let's just say 5 an hour, okay? Coincidentally, that's the same amount of caps you could sew in an hour. that cap, you're probably going to sell it between $8 and $15. Let's say $12 would be a good starting point, and let's say that the cap costs you 2. So let's just pretend you made $10 a cap, so you're working for $50 an hour. Okay, not bad. But let's play that out with an applique, and we'll just say a hoodie. Good quality, may say 80/20 fleece hoodie. Going to be around $15 cost, maybe a little bit more. But we'll just say $15, $2 worth of twill, so we're at 17. That hoodie, if you're going to wholesale that hoodie, that sucker is going to wholesale for about 40 bucks. If it's at retail, it's going to be $65. So let's say 40 bucks is what you're charging the customer. We'll just rough it out and just say our total cost was shipping landed was $20. We're selling it for $20. We're making $20. 20 times 5 is $100 an hour. You're making twice as much doing applique hoodies or crew necks as you are doing baseball caps, and it's even a more stark difference when you get into polo shirts. So one of the reasons that people really like to do applique is it's very profitable, but also the ticket price is higher. And because the ticket price is higher and it has higher margins, guess what? You can really rack up some profit pretty quickly. And I have clients that they don't even like to do embroidery. If you talk to Katie Owen, my coworker for 21 years, she's like, yeah, I'll do embroidery for you. I mean, I'll do it as a courtesy, but I would much rather be doing applique. And her little side hustle business that she did wasn't her side hustle, was her main hustle business when she was in Minnesota. And then when she worked for me, it was her side hustle business. Now it's back to her main hustle that she's retired. That's what she's doing. She's doing this high volume, high ticket, high margin applique, and she's got, the sewing equipment to do it. She's got a vinyl cutter, all that. So it is crazy profitable. So, why do people not get into it? That's a great question. I have no idea. I talk to clients with an embroidery machine. I said, how you doing applique? And they go, no, I don't know how. And I'm just like, what? It's literally the best thing you can do with an embroidery machine. And it's super duper easy once you do it a couple of times. It's not a complicated process, but it's just they don't know where to get started. And that's partly one of the reasons that you take a class like this is you don't know where to get started. So, implementing applique into your workflow, even if you're in a warm weather climate, like maybe you're in the Southeast, people are still wearing those sewn-on tackle twill letters. It's a staple. The other thing is you're repurposing equipment you might already have. So if you have a heat press, already own that. You have an embroidery machine, already own that. Maybe you have a vinyl cutter, already own that. You've been using your cutter for heat press vinyl and maybe for signs. You have a laser engraver and you've been using that for doing laser engraved gift items and awards. And you're like, I can do applique with that equipment. So you're repurposing equipment that you already have. And in my opinion, that's awesome. So, applique is a big deal. And, the thing is when you're getting into it, the most important thing is doing samples. People don't know what you can do unless you show them. And so, it's one thing to go to a Pinterest page and, find a bunch of designs, but it's another thing to go to somebody's website and see an entire portfolio of a gallery of designs that are done in applique. It's demonstrating a capability. And so getting samples of your work is so critically important. And that also implies, being connected into the social media, sphere. And that would be, having Instagram, a showcase of your work on Instagram, or, connecting with Facebook. Curious, let's just do this for a second. Letterman jacket. This is the company right here, Jackswear Inc. Let's go to their website. Never been here, and what a terrible waste to be able to click on that link, and you know what? On that Pinterest, they don't even show up, and it's a dead link. Isn't that sad? So there you go. Let me see if we can find one that'll actually work. Let's go over here. Is this Jackswear? Oh, this is their Pinterest page. So they they have their own Pinterest page and their URL is not even active. What a terrible shame, right? So being able to promote your work through creating galleries in your social media to me is one of the smartest things that you can do. Let's see how we're doing on our outline here. I think I had one more piece that I wanted to cover on that. Yeah, I mean, you're creating a new profit center for your business, but you're also differentiating yourself. And, I remember at the height of the rhinestone thing, and by the way, rhinestones are still popular, but at the height of the rhinestone craze, people were doing, rhinestones. It was getting them in the door with people that maybe they could do their screen printing work for them or their digital printing work or sublimation. So having that one unique thing that gets you in the door, and then all of a sudden you can expand that out to a wider array of products or even promotional products or gift items. Applique has the capability of doing that. And to me, that is one of the coolest reasons for doing it is all the doors that it opens. But it's this extra profit center in your business. People are always like, what am I going to invest in for the new year, right? And I talk to clients, I ask that question pretty frequently this time of year. And I talked to a client last week, and he just bought an automatic screen printing press. Well, it was basically just replacing what he already had, but he bought an automatic screen printing press. Talked to another client, he was buying a direct-to-film system. I was like, oh, great, that's awesome. Direct-to-film transfers are a big deal. Talked to another client, was buying a DTG printer. Talked to another client, they were buying a wide format digital printer for doing signs and banners. But there's probably a piece of equipment within your business that you already have that can create its own profit center without you having to buy anything else other than maybe some supplies, and that's applique. And so before you run out there, and if you're an embroiderer, before you run out there and buy another expensive piece of equipment before the end of the year, you might want to consider maybe dedicating some time and energy to applique, because I know it sounds a little cheesy, it pretty much sells itself. And it is a wonderful technique into the corporate world because you can also do patches with it. And so applique with corporate logos, or what we call lifestyle identity branding type designs, is a huge big deal. And if you don't know what that is, I'll show you real quick. Lifestyle branding would be, instead of just doing the boring corporate logo, is, hey, guess what? Incorporate it into a graphic. This is embroidery right now. You ready? Want me to turn that into applique? It's really hard. Ready? Applique. That's it. That's it. This is the drawing software. That's what we're going to be using in class today. It's literally that easy to convert that into applique. So my point is this, that you already have a profit center within your business that you might not have been aware of, and it's just a matter of training and also incentivizing you to kind of get off your rear end and make some samples and get the ideas out in front of your customers. And there's just nothing better than a real sample. If you have a client you're working with and you're doing their caps and maybe their polo shirts, and you just spend a little bit of time creating some samples, and you just have to pick them for their sample, two really positive things happen. Number one, you got a cool sample you can show to anybody. Number two, you got a cool sample you can show to them, and they might buy, and they basically just paid for the sample you just made that you're going to use to sell to other people. That's cool. When we had our business Desert Sportswear, our salespeople were very fortunate because guess what they had? We had a sampling department. So we would produce all of these samples and come up with all these applique and tackle twill designs and screen printed designs. And our salespeople would get a box 4 times a year that have all these samples in them. And this is what we'd use to go out into the field to sell. And that's in the industry that we were in, which was the resort wear industry and the college bookstore industry. That was expected. You can't even compete in that industry if you don't have samples. But putting your sample line together is just so important, because that's what's going to allow you to sell. It's one thing to tell people, hey, I do applique. It's another thing to knock their socks off with a great looking sample, right? So I was just talking to one of my clients, Ben, today. He has been working out of his garage for 12 years, super successful, very unconventional style of business. He's a GraphicsFlow member. We got him set up as art portal today. And he was saying, hey, I just bought some physical space. I'm not opening up for retail. I'll have customers in there and I'll have a showroom, but I just outgrew my garage and I need to have some access to a production facility. We have a small office in there, and if I want to have customers come in there, they can look around and say, what a neat thing to do is to put some applique samples out. So when these customers come in and they look around, like, oh, I didn't know you guys did that. And we're like, oh yeah, that's one of our specialties, right? So very, very cool thing to be able to showcase a capability and get an additional profit center. So what do you need to do to get started in applique? Well, if you're going to do it yourself, one of the first things you're going to need is some software to create your applique. And all of the major embroidery programs have applique functions, whether you're using Pulse Microsystems, the Pulse software, or you're using a Wilcom software, you're using the Brother PES software, maybe you're using Melco Design Shop. They all have applique functions. But each one of those applique functions, there's varying degrees of complexity, and without shaming anyone, I've used all of those programs, and they're pretty complicated. Doing applique, especially when I used to teach applique in the Wilcom program, it's very powerful for doing applique, but it's not the most intuitive thing out there. And so The program that we use for doing Applique is the drawing software, and that's what you're going to see in the class today. And I think looking at the list, most of you are familiar with drawings, but drawings is not a digitizing program. It allows you to take vector artwork and convert it into a production-ready SO file without digitizing. You just have to create the vector artwork. It creates the SO file. It uses artificial intelligence to make all of the decisions that a human being would normally be making if they were, quote, digitizing a file. And we don't have to do any digitizing. We just call it the D word. This just started out as a piece of vector art. There's the vectors and drawings. The vectors and the stitches are one and the same. It was a piece of vector art. Drawings converted the file over. I went in, and when it was created, we'll undo the change we made. This is the file that drawings created. There was no editing on this. And to make an applique, the way I would do this in drawings, I would do it this way. Number one, I would delete this outer part right here, or I'd make sure, I think it has an outline on it. So I'd just turn that outline off, make sure there's no outline in it. Then what I would do is I would take these objects right here. So I'm gonna take this object right here, and I'm gonna go to fill, and I'm gonna say applique, and I'm gonna choose the type of outline stitch I wanna tack it down with. And I would just simply say satin stitch right there. I'm gonna go down to my colors. I'm gonna make it the blue. So I'm gonna go to outlines and make it a blue outline. And then I would go to the outline properties and I'd say, hey, maybe I want that to be a little bit thinner, not such a big outline. And I wanna change the offset. So let's zoom in here real quick. So the offset is, this is the outline that's tacking down the fabric. That's the fabric. This is the underlying fabric. And so what I wanna do, I want to move that in, so most of this outline is going to go on to the underlying fabric. Just a little bit of it's going to creep over. The reason we want it to creep over is to adjust for to compensate for any shift we might have in the fabric during the sewing process. So we're going to come over here, we're going to go to offset, and I'm just going to move that value so it's about 70, 30, 80, 20 on the underlying fabric, and just a little bit of it creeping over. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select these objects right here that are in the design, and I'm going to tell the software, hey, listen, do not go in and trim these objects through. And you notice where it says remove overlaps, it says auto. In this particular design, because of the size of it, it's not auto trimming the designs through. But I bet you if we make it bigger, because it's a cap patch right now, if we make it 6 inches, it's probably going to start trimming some objects through. Yeah, it does. So it's assuming that you want to save some stitches. So it's trimming those embroidery objects through. We don't want to do that. If we're doing applique, we don't want to do that. We just want to take this and we want to say never here. And so now it's just sewing on top, and that's it. That's all I got to do for applique. One little tweak that I would want to do is I'd take this object right here and I'd go to my fill properties and I would say, hey, how are we going to be tacking this down onto the fabric? How are we going to be doing that? We're going to be doing that utilizing a satin stitch, is how we're going to be doing it. And we're going to be pre-cutting the design on a vinyl cutter. And so there's a specific sequence of events that has to go on to get this properly sewn. And by telling the software, hey, listen, this is going to be sewn pre-cut, and then it's got glue adhesive backing on the twill. By doing that, it's setting the sequence for the sewing. So now I can go over to slow redraw and see what's going on. We can see how it sews. So first thing it'll do is put the black outline stitch, and then it's going to stop the machine so you can lay the fabric down. So we've already cut this out on a vinyl cutter. We're going to lay the fabric down, then it's going to tack that down to stabilize it, and then it's going to sew the satin stitch, and then it's going to come back and hit all the embroidery items. And I have this set to sew center out, so it's sewing center out. That's it. That's all there is to it. So you're going to need to have an embroidery software. I will tell you right now, I am 100% biased. Drawings is the best embroidery software on the planet. You cannot convince me otherwise. We have tens of thousands of users. It has kind of a semi-weird cult following. It is a big deal, and it is affordable, and it is just an absolutely amazing tool, and there is not a better applique software on the planet. You know why I know that? Because we at Katie Owen designed this, and Katie Owen, in my opinion, is one of the leading experts in our country on applique. And when they first came out with the drawing software, which they had an applique function that was very similar to the applique function in Wilcom, Katie had a meeting with the development team over at Drawstitch Corporation that makes the drawing software, and she said, yeah, you can do applique in your software, but you're doing it all wrong. And they're like, what? And she goes, yeah, when you're doing applique, you have to be able to go in and you have to be able to tell the software, like, is this pre-cut? Is it being cut on the embroidery machine when it's sewing? You have a laser bridge. You got to be able to tell it then to set the sequence. You guys are making us go in and manually sequence this to do the running stitch and all that stuff. People don't want to learn how to do that. So they put in the presets. That was smart. Then she said, hey, you don't have any ability to adjust the offset of the satin stitch on the underlying fabric. You need to change that. And that's when they added the functionality for offset. So it was brilliant. They basically, Katie just told them, hey, this is what you guys need to do applique professionally and to automate it. And they listened to us and they did it. And they've listened to us all along. It's pretty awesome. So obviously I'm biased. Drawings, amazing program for doing applique, but you can do applique in other programs. You just have to consult the people that do training for your software. But if you have drawings, we do the training like we're doing right now. Okay. So what are some of the other things that you need to have? You need to have a device to cut your fabric. So that device is going to be one of two things. It is either going to be a vinyl cutter, or it is going to be, or three things: a vinyl cutter, a scissors, or a laser. So it's going to probably be one of those three things. And do you need to have a fancy vinyl cutter to cut fabric? No, you don't. You can cut fabric on a Cricut. You can cut fabric on a Silhouette. The challenge with doing it on those machines is the pace. So if you have a lot of volume, they're really super duper slow. And also cutting force is a little challenging. Accuracy, yeah, can vary. You will have a better experience on a commercial level vinyl cutter. But if you just want to get started, hey, there's nothing wrong with cutting on a Cameo or a Cricut. It'll work just fine until you get a giant order. Then it's not real fun. So the trick with cutting on a vinyl cutter is you either have to have a cutting mat or you have to have material that has already got a cutting backer on it. Usually it's like a Mylar backer. So when you purchase a material for cutting like tackle twill, it will have a backer on it, or you can also purchase lining material. You can line your own fabric. The caveat for that is quite simple. Not all fabrics can be cut on a vinyl cutter. If it's like stretchy material like a jersey knit, that's not going to cut well on a vinyl cutter. Anything that's got some tensile strength to it, it's a little bit more rigid, like a poly cotton twill. A little bit of polyester really helps with being able to cut. And how can you tell if your material is going to cut on your vinyl cutter? The only way you can tell is to try to cut it. I'll talk to Katie and I'll be like, hey Katie, I don't think you can cut that on your cutter. She's like, really? And then she'll come in and 2 days later she's got a sample. Yeah, is this the material you were talking about, Craig, that I couldn't cut? And I was like, oh wow. So you can't really prejudge. You just can't. One of the other things, in terms of the cutting mat, both Cricut and Cameo and all these craft cutters, they all sell cutting mats that you can put fabric on, so you don't have to heat seal a liner material to it. And those are cool. And you can go on Amazon, you get the big Cricut mat, you get the 12-inch wide one, and you duct tape two of them together. You got a big old cutting mat you can use with your commercial cutter that's 24 inches wide. And that's a super clever and cool way to do it. And you can also use that cutting mat for cutting scraps. So that's awesome too. So you need to have if you're gonna do the cutting thing, vinyl cutter. Most fabrics are gonna cut with, on commercial machines with a 60-degree blade. So you're typically gonna use a 60-degree blade. If you don't know what a 60-degree blade is, you need to find out what a 60-degree blade is. So your common commercial cutters, Rollins, GCCs, if you're working with a Graphic, excellent cutter, Suma cutters will all do a great job. On the CCC machines, the cheap Chinese cutter machines that are being imported, some will cut fabric well, but most won't. And the reason they won't is that they're stepper motor machines and they're not particularly accurate. And also they can't overcut past corners. Overcut means is when the cutter goes a corner, like a perpendicular corner, it goes like that or like that. That trims out the fabric, so it makes the weeding, the part of pulling out the excess material, a lot easier. A lot of those machines don't have overcut, and they're very problematic for cutting fabric. You get a lot of fraying, and the corners don't cut cleanly. So, if you stick to the quote name brand machines that are, the more commercially oriented servo motor machines, Graphtec 6000 series, 6 or 7 or 8000 series machines. If you've got a GCC Puma or Jag series, Roland GX series, GS, perfect. But you know, with the if you're experiencing some challenges with the triple C machines, you know, you're not the only one. But you can, you know, you can kind of work with that. So alternative number two would be a laser cutter or laser engraver. That is an amazing way to cut fabric for applique because you can kiss cut. And kiss cutting means that you can stack two layers of fabric, maybe two different color layers of fabric, and cut all the way through both layers on the first cut, and only cut through the top layer on the second cut, and you have two pieces of fabric that are already lined up on top of each other. And if you're doing a lot of volume for like sports lettering and things, that's a really handy thing to have because with the laser, you can do that with a vinyl cutter too if you have like an Ioline applique cutter. I don't believe Ioline still sells the applique cutter. I could be wrong about that, but let's go to their website real quick and still see if they sold it. That was actually a pretty amazing piece a piece of equipment. And let's see if they still sell the applique cutter. Yeah, they do. There you go, 300 system. Somebody told me they discontinued it, but there it is. This is a great alternative to a laser, and it is, in my opinion, one of the very best ways to cut applique. It's got its own little built-in sticky sheet. It's high pressure, but you know these are pretty expensive. I don't see what see if they're quoting prices on these right now. Um, let's see here. Let's see, that's a little misnomer. They're saying that you have to have a $2,500 to $1,250 digitizing software. No. Yeah, so these machines are $6,000, but you can do a lot of the same things on a regular vinyl cutter. Where the eyeline cutter is amazing is it kiss cuts. It has a kiss cutting capability to do double depths or even triple depths. Really neat. So this is, if you're doing high volume applique, this is a pretty neat piece of equipment to have. It also comes with a pretty neat little software. But if you have drawings, you don't need their software. So we can get everything set up for this machine. But let's talk about the third machine, which is a laser cutter, laser engraver. And I just on Trotec's website real quick. There's great machines from Universal, GCC makes machines, Applique makes machines. Trotec is an industry leader. Again, you know, if you buy kind of the off-brand Alibaba, you know, laser of the week from China, you know, some people are willing to do that, and they're able to get under the hood and repair these machines. But I don't hear a lot of success stories with people doing that. And the reason that folks do it is they're considerably less expensive than the brand name machines. And I can tell you almost 100% of the time, maybe I'm wrong, maybe there's somebody that's succeeded with this. I've talked to a customer that's bought one of these Chinese machines off the internet that they have some kind of a failure and they have no way to really fix it. So again, I'm going to recommend staying with one of the big companies, Applique, ULS, GCC, or Trotec. You know, if I was buying a machine, not sure what I'd buy. I do really like the Trotec machines, to be honest with you. But you know, folks can do this with, you know, Glowforge and some of these smaller format machines as well. I was on GCC's website. I noticed they have a new kind of a laser cutter that is a kind of a craft-oriented machine, which is this machine right here, which is designed to compete very favorably with the Glowforge in the same price range, but it's a full 40-watt commercial machine. It's got a pretty big sewing field as well. So, you know, 20 inches by 13, that's a good size sewing field. These machines are around $6,000, I think. So there you go. In terms of, you know, we didn't really show a picture of a vinyl cutter, but vinyl cutters range the full gamut from the, you know, GCC has a little craft-oriented machine as well. These are stepper motor machines. Please avoid for fabric. Then you get into their Puma series and their Jaguar series. This is what I own. I have a Puma 4. It's in my closet back there. So it doesn't let me put it out. But both these machines will cut fabric quite successfully. So the biggest advantage of the laser is being able to kiss cut, and then it can cut just about any fabric. It's a little tricky with the lasers because you can, you know, cut fabric that can light on fire. And so they have to have specialized tooling on the machines like air assist that blows the fire out as it engraves. You can get some charring on some materials around the edges, but usually that's covered up with the embroidery stitches, right? And another advantage of laser, it does seal the edges of twill. So if you're using poly cotton twill and you're cutting with the laser, seals the edges so it doesn't unfray. That's cool. So that's what you need in terms of equipment. Cutter, applique cutter like an eye line, laser, or scissors. Oh, there's another way of doing, which is a laser bridge machine, which they're about $150,000. And if you want to see what that looks like, hold on. Tajima also makes these. This is a laser bridge machine right here, and what it does, it actually has a laser unit attached to the embroidery machine, or that, and it literally, you sew it and it just sits over the top of the hoop, does it frame out, and cuts the fabric out. And this is what the big boys use. So, but that's gonna set you back a little bit. So if you do a laser bridge machine, and there's other laser systems out there, but this is the Proel is the, I believe they're a Swiss or Italian or Austrian company. Where are these guys located? I think they're Italian if I'm not mistaken. Oh no, Japanese. There you go. I was completely on the wrong continent. So, so in terms of materials and supplies and things of that nature, one of my favorite sources for supplies for applique is Twill USA. These guys are the experts. They're also vertical manufacturer. They actually make the applique films, and they cut them into either rolls or sheets. Typically the material that you would use for doing applique, if you'd go down here and click on sports twill is what we want. So sports twill, the standard width for applique and bulk rows is 51 inches. They cut these down to 16.5 because that's 51 divided by 3. That makes sense. So third of the, and they have all the different colors, common athletic colors. The one that we want is the PSA permanent sports twill that has the pressure sensitive adhesive on the back. Why do we want that? Because in the sewing process, it has a sticky, so that when you put the fabric down to tack it down with the machine, you can hit it with a little bit of heat from an iron that activates the adhesive, sticks to the substrate, and you don't get shifting. And that's in my opinion, that's a critical component. You can use spray adhesive. I mean, people use a lot of different things, but the PSA twill that is absolutely the industry standard if you're going to be tacking applique down with an embroidery machine. And you can get it all these crazy colors. It's very affordable. You buy it by the yard. So price per yard for 16-inch materials like $8.50. You'd have to do the yield on that. It's probably going to work out to about $1 a letter. If you're doing, 4 to 6 inch letters, probably somewhere in there, maybe even a little bit less than that. So there you go. That's a really good resource. Dalco Athletic also sells twill, as well as Stahl sells twill as well. But Twill USA is my favorite company. Plus, I know the owners. The owner's dad, John, his dad, my dad were friends. We used to buy from them back in the Desert Sportswear days. They're just good people. So there you go. So let's kind of go through. Let's go back to the outline and see how we're doing. Sourcing materials and supplies, we talked to that. We talked about a laser, we talked about a cutter, we talked about embroidery machine requirements. So let's do a typical workflow, and we're going to do the boring job of all boring jobs. We're going to do a 2-color applique with script text. This is a staple. They will sell forever. I don't think they'll ever go out of style. It will always be a top seller, where it's in a college bookstore or spiritwear line or whatever. It's just a really good, popular look. And so let's get into it, and I'll show you kind of how we would start. First things first, we need to create our cut file. And this is what we're going to kind of end up with. So we need to create our cut file first, and the cut file is going to be transferred into the embroidery software and converted into a sewing file. And so the idea behind the cut file is we have 2 layers, layer 1 and layer 2. This could be created in any vector program. CorelDRAW, Illustrator would be popular programs. I'm going to create this file in CorelDRAW version 2021, and I'm going to cheat a little bit using our Smart Designer add-on software for Corel. And so we're going to create that cut file first. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type in the word central. I'm going to type in the word central. I'm going to use one of the GraphicsFlow fonts, and that font is called American Captain, which is the Captain America font. And I'm going to make it 10 inches wide, which is a good width for an applique. And then one of the things I'm going to do, actually I'm going to make it 9.5 inches wide. and I'm going to spread the letters out a little bit. I'm going to grab my shape tool real quick here, and I'm going to grab this little handle, and I'm going to spread the letters out just a little bit to give myself some room to apply an outline to this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch this a little bit taller, make it a little bit taller, and I'm going to color it, we'll just color it blue for now. And I am going to center justify that real quick. And so if I was using Corel and I just wanted to create an arc, what I would do is I'd go to Effects, I'd go to Contour, I would do what's called an outside contour, and I'd put a number of steps and an offset, and I'd hit apply. And if you're going to go this route, what you're going to do is you're going to need to make sure you go into Object and break the contour group apart so they're separated from each other. So that's kind of the standard Corel way of doing it. I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to do it the Smart Designer way right now. I'm going to do ours a little different because I'm going to put a flat top arc on it. I'm going to make it a little bit taller. I'm going to put a flat top arc on it. So I'm going to go into the Smart Designer add-on software for Corel. That's what's happening over there. And you notice I'm going to go over here to FX. I'm going to go over here to Live Envelopes, and I'm going to do a bottom arc right there, bottom arc. And I'm just going to slide that over to give myself a little bit of that arc. And I'm going to go ahead and shut the webcam down so we have a little more screen real estate here. All right, so once I have that bottom arc here, also, one of the things that's nice about the bottom arc, you don't have to have the shirt perfectly lined up if you put a little arc on here. But what we want to do is we want to create the layers for the applique. And in this case, I think we're gonna either do a 2-color or 3-color. I haven't decided yet, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna apply an effect to this. I'm gonna go to Outline Effects in Smart Designer, and I'm gonna click on Double Outline No Shadow. These are just the different effects. And I'm going to use, for 10-inch text, I'm going to use an outline of 0.06. I'm not going to knock a color out so that the white is the substrate. We want to stack some colors on top of each other. I don't want to remove the underlay. That will trim the colors through each other. We don't want to do that. We just want them stacked right on top of each other. So we're just going to go ahead and hit apply, and there we go. I'm not interested in this outer color at all. I'm gonna drag maybe we'll drag some orange over here. I'm not interested in the outer color. We're just gonna delete it. Hit delete. I'm just interested in good old 2-color twill designer right there. That's it. That's all we want. That's the whole setup. Script text, we're gonna do that in drawings with embroidery text because then we can name drop it, which is kind of neat. So we got this laid out. Now, controversial, do you want the center parts in these letters? Maybe not, but I'm not going to make that decision here because I can do that in drawings. So this is my cut file. This is the file that we are going to cut out of material. So what we're going to do next is we are going to create the sew file. And so I'm going to go over here in drawings. First things first, I'm going to pick the hoop from my embroidery machine, and we'll switch over to Melco. So I'll go and do a Melco hoop. Most Melco users are going to be using all the magnetic hoops. So we could go in there, or we could just go to Mighty Hoop too. That might be easier. Just go down to a Mighty Hoop. But you've got your hoop manufacturers in here. And so I'm just going to go down here and we're going to pick either an Amaya or a Bravo. And we're just going to pick the hoop. And typically you're going to want to have something of this nature. You're going to typically use like an oversized hoop. So this is a big old tubular hoop that's pretty big. I'm also going to pick a fabric preset. I'm going to use the normal preset because this is going to be a very typical average style of embroidery. So we're going to go ahead and click on normal, and we are going to click on OK, and we are going to create a new document. Ta-da! Okay, so, and I'm going to change the background color on that. We're going to make that more like a white, kind of an off-white there. Okay, so to get the file into here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this in Corel, and I can either copy and paste, or I can drag and drop. If I drag it, I have to drag it under the drawings icon, and then I'm going to release it. If your colors are coming over and they're not coming over as accurately, if they're coming over as all gray, what that means is that you're using some kind of off-the-wall color palette, and what you want to do is make sure to recolor this as Pantone colors. In the Smart Designer software, we can do that quite easily. I don't have to in this case because these are already Pantone colors because I've been choosing them from over here. But if in Smart Designer, if you come over here and you go to color management, you can just click on convert to spot and it'll automatically convert these to Pantones. I don't need to do that because they're already Pantones. The other thing you should do is, in general, convert outlines, or excuse me, convert to curves. I didn't have to do that because when I did the outline effect in Smart Designer, it did that for me automatically. If you don't convert to curves, sometimes the text will be kind of jarbled. But I think garbled is the correct word there. So back to drawings. Okay, we're in drawings. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to center this to the hoop. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to say center to hoop. Second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ungroup it. Right click, ungroup. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the software to not trim through, because watch what happens when I turn this into an applique. I'm going to select the whole thing. Just going to do a select all. I'm going to go to fill. I'm going to go to applique. It's automatically going to trim this color through that color because it's trying to preserve stitches. So what I need to do is I need to take this part right here and I need to select under my fill properties where it says remove overlaps. We're going to switch that to never. So once we switch that to never, let's see here. Then it's not going to trim through. So let's see what's going on here. Yep, there you go. So it's not trimming through. Outline stitch, everybody's good. So now we got to decide the stitch type. So we're gonna get crazy, man. We're gonna do something that in the wild you probably wouldn't do, which would be a satin and a zigzag, but for the purposes of education, we're gonna do it that way. So I'm gonna select the outer part here, which is the orange, and I'm gonna select a satin stitch for my tack down. And since I know this is going to be cut on a pre-cut fabric on my vinyl cutter with glue, I'm going to select that preset. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to outline. I'm going to reduce the size of that outline to 1.2. I'm going to go to my outline colors here. We are going to make this white. And then what we're going to do is change the offset. And so I'm going to zoom in on that real quick. So we're just going to click on that and I'm going to go to my outline properties. I'm going to change my offset. So I'm going to use a negative value to move that satin stitch. So it's again 70, 30, 80, 20-ish on the fabric and just maybe 20 to 30% on the underlying substrate. On this right here, we're going to use white thread as well, but we're going to change that from an E stitch, which is the default, to a zigzag. Okay, this is going to be really cramped for a zigzag. And so what we're going to do is go to outline and I'm going to reduce this to about 1.6 maybe. That's pretty good. And then 1.6, I'm actually go a little bit bigger, 1.8. And you're gonna see we're gonna get start to get some weird stuff going on these pointed parts right here, okay? Because of it's too narrow of a spot. So we talked a little bit about what to do with these orphans, and I left them in on purpose because what I want to do is I want to show you how you can go in here and just use your edit node functions in drawings just to delete them. You don't need it now. So that's one thing you can do. And then the other thing over here on this object right here, we could go in and start deleting some of these nodes in here. And we could also go in here and change the shape of that if we wanted to. And that would definitely help in terms of, we're trying to pack all these weird zigzag stitches in here. The other thing we can do is we can change the density of this. If we go and change the density of the zigzag stitch, you notice we're making the stitches closer together. That's actually helping quite a bit. And actually that looks pretty good, but we can go and tweak that later on. Let's also go in and change the offset on this. So we're gonna go to offset on this outline stitch. And we're gonna use a negative value on that too. We're gonna push that in a little bit. Yeah, that looks really good. So there we go. As far as the colors are concerned, I think I'm gonna go orange here. Ooh, yeah, it's too much. kind of needs to be white. So in real world, I would definitely not do a zigzag in there. I would without a doubt do another satin, but I just want to show you kind of how zigzag stitches work, because we're going to actually do some tweaking on this. So we're going to go back, and on our offset, we're going to move that back. Again, we're going to move it in a little bit. There we go. Even a little bit more. All right, looking good. Okay, so as far as the embroidery object is concerned, pretty easy. By the way, all these jump stitches are going to get trimmed, and we'll talk about that in a second. The embroidery object, we're just going to go down here, and I'm just going to type in central. We're going to type in wrestling. Okay, this is the classic of all classics, and you notice, hey, wow, that text I typed it in, it's instant embroidery. That's not an embroidery font. That's just a font. And so that's just a true type font sitting on my system. Drawings is going to convert all those over to embroidery for you. But what we're going to do is we're going to do a keyboard typable embroidery font. So I'm just going to type in X over here. And these are all the keyboard fonts. And we're just going to use a simple script. We'll find one that we like that looks good with that W. So let's see. Come down in here. Not feeling it. Let's see. Want something pretty athletic. Yeah, that's good. So I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger. We're gonna put this on a black shirt. So I think I'm gonna go purple, or excuse me, I'm gonna go orange for the lettering, looking good. And Drawings is just gonna automatically create all the blocking for the embroidery font. I don't have to do anything at this point. That's perfect. And we'll make sure that's all nice and centered up. Could go just a little bit bigger. This is the thing. How much benefit are you? This is 2,500 stitches. So this whole design, if I select it, this whole design is 13,400 stitches. And most of that is the satin stitch that's going around the perimeter of this. If you change this thing to zigzag, double zigzag, now you're at, the whole job is 9,300. So that's just kind of an interesting phenomenon there. All right, so the design's looking good. I got a little bit of cleanup I got to do. So I'm going to go over here and we're going to save this. And I'm just going to go create a folder on my desktop, Applique samples. Projects. Okay. And we're going to pop that in there and we'll call it Central Wrestling. And we'll take a look at it. Looks good. Now, here's the thing. If I want to get in here, a couple of prep things that I got to do here. Okay. Number one is I can't pick my colors in here. So if I go to Color Manager and say, I think we're going to go back to more of a navy blue over here. I can pick my colors. Actually, that royally blue looks pretty good right here. And then this orange, we're going to make the orange a little brighter. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to match this to Madeira. So as soon as I go over here and go to Madeira Poly Neon, it's going to do closest match to my Madeira palette. And if it turns out I don't happen to have that color, if I selected the color here, I can go over here to my Madeira palette and then pick a new color. So that's a pretty cool little feature in there. So I just picked the color that I did have. I selected all the orange and selected the color that I happen to have. So that's thing number one. Then thing number two is, where do we want to sew the wrestling? Last? Yeah, we do. But if you were sewing it first, you'd do this. You just move it up through the object order. Okay. The next thing I want to do is I want to go to Tools and I want to go to the Optimizer. And here's where I tell it how I want it to process the design. I'm telling the software that I want it to trim between every object that's further apart than 0.02 inches. That's like a half a millimeter. So it's going to trim every thread automatically. And so I'm not going to have to do any hand trimming. So we're going to leave that there. We're going to have it set to endpoints at closest connection. So it jumps from object to object at closest point. Optimization strategy, we're going to have it so largest to small, which is what we should do in a big design like this. We're going to give it permission to have more color changes to improve quality. And then over here, applique frame out distance. I'm going to change that to 1.5. So what that's going to do is when it stops after doing the running stitch, it's going to push my frame out so I can slip that fabric underneath it. And so I'm going to save that just for that job. So, couple things. Now I'm in here and I'm like, man, I really want to. I'm compelled to move a couple of those zigzag stitches. I just literally can't help myself. So here's what you're going to do. If you got to do that, if you just feel like you have to do that, click this object right here, take it out of auto mode. Okay, go out of auto mode, and you got what's called the optimizer. If you click on the optimizer and click on advanced, it will separate that stitch from its parent object, and now you can go and have a stitch editing party till the cows come home. You just go over here and go to the edit stitches function, and you can click on the individual stitches and start moving them around. You can do all kinds of fun stuff if you want to do that. I am not a fan of doing that at all. But if you feel that you need to do it, you can do it. So here, let's go back. So take it out of auto mode, go into optimizer, select the whole design, optimize it, then you're into stitch mode where you can start moving stitches around with the edit stitch function. So move that guy there on there if you need to do that. Move that guy there. Okay, so if you are going to do that, and you can delete stitches too. If you're going to do that, I would save this as a save as and rename it. So you have the original one where it's attached, because you might want to use this as a template. Okay, so we have a copy. So now you have a copy. So if you feel compelled to do that. Rest of the production steps, couple things. Number one, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to do a save as, and I'm going to save this as my sewing format. So if I just wanted to do a generic file, I would save it as a DST. If I'm using Melco equipment because I have a Melco hoop, if I select this and I put a drive in, so I put a USB drive in and I select it, then I can go over here and say to USB storage, and it's going to save it as a Melco expanded file, which is great. If I have Design Shop and I'm using that to run my machine, it's gonna allow me to import it in Design Shop. You're gonna be able to see all the colors in the file. You can map it to the machine. Really cool. Same thing if you're using a Brother machine. You do have to pick the Brother hoop and the model for your machine so that it knows what version of the Brother PES to save it to. Very, very important, because the PES version behaves very differently from version to version to version. Your machine needs a specific version of the PES format in order to view the colors correctly. Don't have to worry about that with DST files, because DST files do not save colors, period. So we don't have to worry about that. But one thing that we can do is we can also save this file as an NGS file, which isn't a bad idea, because maybe somebody in the sewing room doesn't have drawings, and then maybe they want to go and open this file up and move some stitches around because they're OCD. They can open up the NGS file in the freely distributed My Editor software, and then they could do all the basic editings of trims and stops and all that fun stuff in My Editor. And then when they're done, they can save it to whatever format they choose for their embroidery machine, which is really cool. So that's what the NGS file allows you to do. But basically at this point, we're ready to go. I always recommend anytime you put something into manual mode to put it back into auto mode when you're done and save it, because that will go back to auto sequencing, which is typically better than whatever sequencing you're doing. Now, bear in mind, we have the word wrestling in there, so the design is going to be a little bit out of center again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and go back to auto center to center to the hoop, because remember we added the word wrestling, so it's a little bit out of center. Another thing, couple things I'm going to do. I'm going to go over here. We're going to export this as an image file. And the reason we're going to do that is I might want to show the customer what it's going to look like. And you remember we made some changes to the file. We got rid of that centerpiece. So I'm also going to export it as an SVG file. Because this is our new cut file. because we made those changes. So, okay, let's kind of full circle this thing. All right, you ready? So I'm back in good old Corel, and I'm going to import the SVG file. So where's my SVG? Right there. And this is the new cut file. Check it out. All the vectors came over. Isn't that cool? So we can just ungroup it. For the cutting, we don't need that part of the vector. That's from the text. We don't need any outlines on these, so I'm going to select the whole thing. I'm going to right click to turn the outlines off, and here's your cut file right here. Right here. There's your cut file. You got everything you need. So that is super duper awesome. So here's color 1, here's color 2. Everything you need to do your cutting. Super duper sweet. Okay. So depending on your cutting software, I use the StoneCut family of software. So I would go over here and I would click on my StoneCut icon. That's going to open up the StoneCut software. The file is going to come over. I do not have to mirror it. Do not have to mirror it. If I'm going to do this as a laser cut, I need to set it up for my laser. But if you're cutting twill or fabric material to your cutter, you do not have to go in and do anything in terms of the mirroring part, which most of you guys are used to mirroring heat press vinyl. So I'm just pumping this over to the StoneCut software. I would load my twill material into the machine. Machine's normally going to cut with a 60-degree blade. I'm going to slow the machine way down, probably at around 30 inches per second or centimeters per second, maybe even a lower, maybe even down to 15. I'm going to have the blade set to the thickness of the twill, which is probably going to be about half a credit card thickness. And I'm going to cut it at between 150 and 180 grams of downforce pressure, depending on your machine. GCC cutter is going to be probably about 150. So to cut this, all I would really do in this particular software, I would just say cut. I would pick my machine, my Puma 4. I already have it set to twill. I have the pressure set to 150. I'd load the material. It's going to ping the machine. I have 16.5-inch material in there. It's probably going to read out at about 15. I don't need to mirror anything, but I'm just going to cut color layer 1, which is going to be the orange. I'm going to hit preview. There we go. I'm going to tell it how many I need. I need to do 8 of these. So I'm going to say, you know what? I need to do 8 of these. So 1 across, or 8 across, 1 up. Terrible use of material. So I'm going to go over here and say optimize. Optimize. What's that going to do? It's going to allow me to, I'm going to say from working area, it's going to optimize the material for 15-inch width. So I'm going to say rotation as required. And look, it optimized all the material. And if I want to make life a little easier for me, I could put individual weed borders around there too, if I wanted to. So that's one way to cut it. That's real cool. I could also drag weed borders down from here, just drag them. And even if they go through the letters, guess what? They're not going to cut through the letters. They're going to skip over the top. So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it would be to just manually ungroup this, move this apart, and then just we'll do the other color. Hit E to put a weed border around the whole thing and do the same thing. Go over here, click on cut. We still at 15 inches. We're going to cut just the selected object because that's what's selected. Hit preview. We're doing 8. Let's optimize the material again. Bada boom, bada bing. Now you got an individual weed border around the whole thing. So that's the other way of doing it. And so again, slowing the cutter down on twill is a good idea. Cutting between 150 and 180, 60-degree blade, it's not hard. You want to do a test cut. If you're having trouble doing weeding, because the corners are not cutting out cleanly, you either need to adjust the overcut physically on your machine, or you're running the StoneCut software, do this. Go to macros over here and click on cut with overcut, and it'll automatically put an overcut on all the corners so that they cut past each other. And weeding is quite a bit better on small text or twill or on any kind of glitter type vinyl that tears. So there's that part. So we were maybe a little ahead of ourselves because we really we haven't gotten the sale yet. So let's get the sale because that's kind of what this is all about. So maybe we've never done applique for this customer. We just want to get this in front of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import, guess what, that PNG file. Da-da-da-da. We're going to import it. And then what I'm going to do in Smart Designer, I'm going to go to my virtual samples. And we are going to find a sweatshirt for this. Probably look good on a, I don't know, it'll look good on black, but I think it's going to look really good on gray. So let's see here. Port Authority crew neck, but it's going to look good. Boom. Let's make that bigger so it's more accurate. Okay, looking good. And we're just going to export this as a PNG file. All right. Make sure we have transparent background selected. And, might as well make it on black too. What the heck? Let the customer pick. Maybe they order both. Change that to black. There you go. So how am I going to get this in front of the customer? Let me use my GraphicsFlow account. That's all I'm going to do. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to log into my GraphicsFlow account. I'm going to create a folder. I'm going to call that folder. Actually, we can go in an existing folder, Central Cougars. I'm going to create a subfolder here. We're going to call it Wrestling. And then I'm going to upload all the collateral files that have everything I need in order to do this production. All these files are going in here. So I'm going to go to my Applique projects folder, and I'm going to automatically upload all these files, including the cut file. There you go. So here's the DST file. DST doesn't track color data. So the DST file is here, and you can see it, but it doesn't track color data. Here's the PNG of the embroidery. That's going to be better to show the client. And then let's go and create a quick little art approval over here. And I'll just say create new. We'll call this Central Wrestling. Put a little description here. Coach. Applique is very popular. I put this concept together for you. Okay. I'm just going to go to my art and go to my Central Cougars Wrestling folder. And I'm just going to add the two PNG files. Boom. This one, whoop, that one, and that one. Actually, we're going to do all three. And probably what I'm going to show at the top, I'm going to show the bigger image of the embroidery. I don't have to watermark this because these are, it's embroidered. They're going to have somebody digitize it. So, but what I would do is I would come in here and I would change the background color, and I probably put it on white just so it pops a little bit. So I just clicked on the graphic, and I'm going to go to my background colors, and I'm just going to put that on white. If I did want to watermark it, I would just go over and click on watermark here, and then it's automatically going to watermark it. We can do that just for grins. You'd have to do the dark style of the watermark, otherwise you're not going to really be able to see it. There you go. And then add my customer over here. So we'll invite them. And coach, just pick a color. Now I'll get you quoted up. We can also split the order between colors. colors or add hoodies. Boom. So Coach just got that email. Coach can look at the link here. I'll copy the generic link into the chat so those of you that are on the live class can. You can not comment, you can't approve, but you can certainly look. Okay. And Coach gets it, looks at it, has a comment like the black. All right. Cool. Okay. Refresh your browser. Just sent the comment back. Just going to change that to black real quick, and we turn off the watermark, might as well. And boom. They refresh the browser, they see the updated version. Maybe they reject this one. Maybe they approve this one. They're getting emailed on their choices saying, hey, you rejected this, you approved that. And boom, that's how we do it. It comes into your art approvals. We got to clear the rejected one. So it's still going to stay as open because we got to clear the rejected one. So what I would do is just come in here and just delete this guy. We don't need him. That's how we do it. That's how we incorporate all of this into your GraphicsFlow account. And so being able to get ideas, we talk about samples and having physical samples. We don't always have to do physical samples. We can also do virtual samples. So we cleared the rejected one. Now it's showing as approved. That's it. If you need to resend it, you just say resend it. That's it. That's all there is to it. So you can probably tell I'm a huge, gigantic fan of Applique. Me personally, my personal fashion and consumption habits, I love it. I wear it. I wish we had more cool weather that I could wear it. It is popular universally across all age groups. It is super popular in the college market, especially amongst fraternity and sorority wear. It is a timeless classic. It is very profitable. You all need to learn how to do it. I promise you, if you have embroidery machines, you go back and you watch this video and you do a little bit of experimentation on your machine, maybe a couple YouTube videos, you can produce a beautiful applique file, get it in front of your customer, sell it, use it as a case study, show other customers, hey, look what we're doing in your local community. This is what I did for Central. I can do something similar for you. That's it. Yes, and all the webcasts, you can go back and rewatch them from the GraphicsFlow YouTube channel. So if you just go to graphicsflow.com and you click on YouTube down here at the bottom, there's our little link to our YouTube right here, and you can watch all the webcasts. This will get posted probably not till we get back from B, because we're closed next. No, this will get posted tomorrow. Actually, I'm not working, but the office is. So you can go back and go to here's all the playlists. Here's previous classes. There you go. You can watch them all. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recorded portion of the webcast, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A.